Hey, my name's Kevin Crow. I go by Jesus Unfollower online on various platforms, and this is my deconversion story. And I have no script. I'm not reading off anything. I'm just gonna speak from the heart and see what happens. So, I grew up as a Christian. When we were young, I went to church from time to time, but we didn't go all the time. I feel fortunate in that way that I wasn't like heavily indoctrinated, that I didn't grow up in this super strict religious culture that, meant that I was homeschooled or that I went to private school or that we weren't allowed to watch secular TV or listen to secular music or anything like that. It was just like basically my mom was like, we should be in church. We need to go to church. I want to raise my kids as Christians. But we didn't really have a home church for a long time. We would bounce back and forth between Baptist churches because I was born in Michigan. We moved to the South when I was young, and we didn't have a church that like the rest of our family went to or anything. It was just like my mom wanted to find a church, so we would go visit different Baptist churches, and we would go not every week, a couple times a month, 2 or 3 times a month. But I never knew that not believing in God was an option. That was never on the table. That was never something that I thought was possible. I never heard the word atheist. I didn't know that that was a thing. I didn't know that, those people existed for a long time. The first time that I ever heard the word atheist was in 8th grade. My friend Justin at school and we were sitting in the bleachers during gym class. I think like I don't know what we were doing. I think maybe running track or something. Maybe we ran a mile and then afterward we were just sitting in the bleachers. But I remember sitting in the bleachers talking to Justin, and I have no idea how the subject of religion came up at all. But somehow we got to talking about Noah's Ark, and he said, I don't know how that could possibly be true. How could Noah's Ark have really happened? And he started talking about the logistics of it all. Like, how would the kangaroos have made it to Australia? How is it possible that all these animals, some of them whom are natural predators of the others, like how would the pairs of these animals all come from all over the place to get on this one boat that this dude built? How in the world could this guy build this giant boat anyways that could hold all this? And logistically, yeah, it just did not make sense. And so I was kind of agreeing with what he was saying that, yeah, it doesn't seem like that's really possible. But at the same time, I was like, well, God can kind of do whatever. So like if if it seems not possible to us, that doesn't mean that it was impossible for God. And so like even though that sort of made me think a little bit, and a lot of times I'll attribute that to like the initial crack in my foundation was that. Um but I patched it up real quick, like Flex Seal, Uh, and I was like, I can't possibly think like that. So let me pivot. And yeah, I still believed in God. Like, even though that thing didn't make sense to me, that didn't mean that God wasn't real. And so I just went back to being the same believer that I was, even though, at that point I didn't read my Bible much. And like I said, we were bouncing between churches. It wasn't until um, in my high school years, about junior year, we started going to a Pentecostal church. A friend of ours invited us there. We went to this church, and I walked in, and it was unlike anything that I had ever seen in my life. It was loud music, it was people jumping around, clapping, cheering. There was barely an empty seat in the whole house. Loud instruments, like songs that I had not heard, upbeat, dancing. There were people playing tambourines in the altar. There were people dancing in the altar. There were waving flags, and I was just taking it all in. I was just looking around like, what have I stumbled into? And I'll never forget this. We finally found our seat. We had to you know, navigate through this crowd of people and try to find some empty chairs. We found some. Well, the music was going. They were still worshiping heavily. And then suddenly the keyboardist stopped playing. She lifted her hands off the keys like this. And then she just took off running around the church, like running laps, around the perimeter, the inside of the church, just screaming. And I'm like, what is happening? And little did I know that was the Holy Ghost. But that was all new to me. I had never been to a church like that. I had never experienced anything like that. I had never seen anything like that. And then it's funny how stuff like that becomes normal so fast. It went from what in the world is this to suddenly I'm going to church there Sunday mornings, Sunday nights. Thank you, truck. I'm going Sunday mornings, Sunday nights, Wednesday nights, and then Friday nights sometimes. My church had a thing, I think it was like once a month that they would call Friday Night Fire. And I would start going to that. And so it was just the frequency of going to church was more and more and more. And then the perfect storm. My church put on this play called Heaven's Gates and Hell's Flames. If you're not familiar with it, it's a play where this company travels around the country and they put on this play of Heaven's Gates and Hell's Flames. I guess it's a play. That's what I call it. It's like a drama. I don't know. And what they do is they get people from the church to take part in it too. So they put on this big dramatic theatrical play, and people from my church were part of the cast. And so I'm sitting there and it's basically scare tactics. It's talking about like, if you don't know God and then you die, you're going to hell. And they would reenact this stuff by having scenes where there was one scene where there were 4 teenagers up on the stage and they were pretending like they were in a car and they were drinking and, talking about sex and drugs and stuff. And then the car crashes and they all go to hell. But in a very this is supposed to scare the audience type of way where there's a God voice that's like, depart from me, I never knew you, workers of iniquity. And the demons run from off the stage dressed in all black and they start pulling these teenagers, my friends, people that I went to church with that I knew, pulling them to hell. There I am, 17 years old, watching this, scared to death because I'm like, okay, there are things like, what happens if I'm driving home and I say a cuss word or something and then I crash and die? Does that mean I'm going to hell? Am I okay? I don't know. I got so scared by that I went up to the altar and I gave my life to Christ that night. Now, for the months, maybe year before that, I was going through the motions. I was going to church. I was praying. I was reading the Bible, but I wasn't really saved, I guess you would say. I never had this big confession to Jesus about my sins and wanting him to be Lord of my life. That didn't happen until that play. And it was so powerful that they put it on again the next night. And I went up and I rededicated my life the next day. That has some damaging effects on children. I was a child. I was 17. Watching that stuff and it just being, it's just, fear tactics. It's scaring you. It's scaring people into salvation. Well, that got me in the door of being saved, of living for Jesus, whatever. I became really dedicated, devoted. I prayed every day. I asked God for guidance in my life. Help me with this decision. Help me with that decision. Show me what you want. Your will be done, not mine. Reading the Bible, talking to my friends about Jesus. I lost one of my best friends in high school. Not he didn't die. I lost him as a friend because I told him that he was idolizing Insane Clown Posse because he had posters of them on his wall and because he talked about them all the time and listened to their music a lot. I told him that he was living incorrectly and that he needed to give his life to Jesus. Well, as you could guess, our friendship drifted apart because I was the one that changed, not him. He was always the same guy. He was one of the nicest people I ever knew. Really kind, great friend, would do anything for you. And there I was destroying the friendship because of Jesus Christ. And honestly, our friendship never got back on track. We're friends-ish now, but not like it was. I don't hang out with him. I don't talk to him really, except occasionally, saying something in a Facebook comment. Like that friendship, he was one of my closest friends. I went over to his house. We spent the night. Like we would play WrestleMania 2000 on the Nintendo 64 and just talk about whatever and hang out. Like it was awesome. And like we would do all that, but then like I screwed it up because like I told him how he needs to change, now he needs to live. So I lost that friend, but I gained a lot more in the church, people who believed the same way that I did. And I became part of the worship band at church. I played the bass and like the easiest instrument, of course. And that just became part of my routine. And then I became good friends with the youth pastor and his kids. They're a little younger than me, but like they're still some of my best friends today. We played in the worship band together, and like that was just such a huge part of my life. And then I got married young too, because I thought that's what God wanted for me. And I had people at the church telling me, like, yeah, this is what God wants. God put you together. I see it in a vision. God spoke to me and said that, yeah, you two were supposed to get married. And so that happened. I got married at 22. And, as a lot of people who get married young do, they watch their marriage dissolve. And mine, ended. Let's just put it that way. But I was a Christian, a very devout Christian for many years. From really, I would say from 17 to about 25, I was really strong in my faith. Then we had a church split. And if you know anything about churches, you know that they split often. The congregation's like, no, we don't believe in what the pastor's doing. We think it should be this way. And so then they go start their own church. And if you're in the South, you have 1,000 churches within like a mile of where you are at all times. And everybody's a pastor. And so that's what happened. There was some deal with the pastor and the youth pastor, and I ended up going where the youth pastor went because I was friends with him and his family, and like I thought that the head pastor was in the wrong, so I went with them. And then that church that they went to moved a little further away, and at this point, I had already started doubting a little bit. I don't know why exactly, but I had thoughts of like, is this real? Do I really believe this? I think it was because of like, a lot of those antics in the Pentecostal church and seeing people speaking in tongues and doing the holy laughter thing. Holy laughter is weird, but I witnessed it a time or two, and it's like people just laughing uncontrollably and chalking it up to the Holy Ghost. And I think I always had a little bit of that doubt in the back of my mind, like, this doesn't seem real. Like, what is this? Well, when the youth pastor moved to the other church and then it moved further away, I stopped going to church as much. I would take a Sunday off because I just didn't feel like going. And then I was like, this feels better. Not going to church feels better. And maybe Christians would say, oh, that's because, the he wants you to feel that way. And like sin feels good. So of course it felt good not going. But it wasn't that. It was just like, I'm just living my life as a normal human without this message of you're unworthy, you're not good enough, you're not supposed to be able to go to heaven. You better thank Jesus because he's the only reason that you're not going to hell, like that whole thing. And so I had already started having those doubts. And that was about 2009, 8, 9. Well, I worked at a flooring company. I worked in the shipping department, and I would go walk laps around the building because it was a stressful job. So like if I got a break at all, I would go outside and walk around the building when it was nice and just like move my body, felt good, de-stress a little bit, remind myself that there's more outside of work because sometimes like if you have a job that you don't like, it can consume you. So I would go walk around the building. Well, there was a guy named Ron, shout out Ron if you're watching, which you're not. Ron would stand outside and smoke cigarettes in the front of the building. And so like when I started walking, like he would be out there every day when I was walking. And we were kind of friends. Like we were coworkers, colleagues. We didn't talk a lot, but we started talking more And then one day, I don't know why, but he asked me if I believe in God. And I said, yes. And we got to talking about that subject. And he said that he used to be a preacher and he would go preach all over the place. But then like he always had this desire to be more educated, to go to college. Thanks, truck. Live next to the interstate, they said. It'll be fun. Um, he had this desire to go to college, but his the elders at his church and stuff were telling him not to, because they were saying that higher education institutions are the devil, basically Satan. You know, the woke liberal professors will get you. Satan, will get you if you go to college. Well, he ignored that and he went anyways, and he took a basic religion class. Nothing special, but it talked about like the different religions around the world, and he said that he noticed that geography had a lot to do with it. And I know that that's kind of a fallacy to say that where you live determines what you're going to believe, but there's a strong correlation to that. That if I were born in India, what were the chances that I would be a Christian? If I were born in China, what would be the chances that I would believe the same way I do? Even if my parents believed, if my parents believed in a different God than the Christian God, I would believe in a different God too. And so it just kind of hit me. And I was like, oh, wait a minute. Why is my religion right and all the other religions wrong? It has to be because that's the way I was raised. That's the majority of the people around me believe this thing. Of course I do. And so immediately this light bulb went off. And I was like, I don't think I believe any of this. And it took me a few months of questioning God and talking to God when I wasn't sure if he was even there, of like, are you real? Diving into the Bible, reading, praying, just questioning, asking God, I want to believe in you. I want to think that you're there, but I felt that belief slipping away. Like I didn't really believe it anymore, but I wanted to. I didn't want to lose that community. I didn't want to lose, there's a real feeling of like, oh, wait a minute, there's nobody looking out for me, in the supernatural realm. If you're a believer, you kind of feel like, oh yeah, God's got my back, he's watching out for me. He's going to take care of me. You go somewhere, you pray a hedge of protection around yourself of like, God's got me, that kind of thing. Well, that was kind of scary because I'm like, oh shit, what if he's not there? Then it's just me. And I didn't have that anymore. And then so it was a couple months of me trying to navigate that and trying to reconcile, like, do I believe? Do I not? Like, what, where am I spiritually? And I remember I finally came to the conclusion that I don't think that God exists. And if there is a God, it's definitely not the one that I had always believed in and been taught to believe in and stuff. And so the first time that I ever said out loud, I don't think God is real, it was really, really scary because I was like, oh shit, what if God heard me say that and, is mad at me for it or going to punish me for questioning? But then the more I sort of deconstructed and thought about things, the more I was like, I just don't, there's no reason for me to be scared, because when I was a Christian, I didn't fear punishment in other religions. I didn't fear other hells. And those religions didn't fear my hell. So why should I fear any hell at all? It was that the fear of hell is a strong, strong pull. I think a lot of people stay in religion because of that what if. But I was able to finally get past that. And I don't think it's anything that I did to be like, oh yeah, I thought my way out or anything like that. I think it has a lot to do with when I didn't grow up with my roots as deep as some people do in religion. And I'm thankful for that because, you know, we it was things were a little more normal, more secular. Like I said, I went to public school and like I was it was never like drilled into my head like it is for some people. Like some of the people that I went to church with at that church, like that's all they ever knew. They grew up going to church 4 or 5 times a week. Their parents are pastors or deacons or whatever. Like, I think it's way harder for those people to walk away or to question even, to even allow themselves to question. It's harder for them than it was for me, and I am thankful for that. Uh, I mean, I would like to think that I could attribute some of it to my own skepticism and questioning and stuff, but I don't know, like, anyway, all that to say, I've been an atheist for 16 years now, and I started creating content as Jesus Unfollower in 2019 after a breakup with my then religious girlfriend. I was like, I need an outlet for talking about religion because I didn't really feel comfortable or safe talking about it around my friends and family. So I created an Instagram account just to make some silly memes and sort of vent about some of my frustrations with religion. And then it sort of started growing, and I noticed that there were more accounts doing stuff like that. And there were people in my comments saying, "Thank you for this. I relate to that." Uh, and like that meant a lot to me. And I wanted to keep going for that reason. Like for people saying, I had a really hard day. My mom told me that I need God and that, if I don't do XYZ, then God will think this about like that kind of stuff. And then, but they're like, your page made me laugh today. And that was all I needed because like my thing for my whole life has been, I want to make people laugh. Like that's always been the thing that means the most to me is humor. And like if I can make somebody laugh, especially in a really hard situation or after a really hard day for them, sign me up for that. So then I kept going with that. And then right before the pandemic happened, I lost my job and I was having a hard time getting another one because nobody was hiring. And so then I kind of dove into making more content. I never set out to be a content creator. I still don't even feel like one sometimes, but I just wanted to like talk about this with people who understand. And like the ex-Christian atheist community online is awesome. And like I've made real friends through there. I met my fiance through my Instagram account. And so it's just been awesome. I made a deconversion video like 5 years ago on this channel and it's terrible. So I wanted to make this one to retell the story, talk about it a little bit more. And I'm going to be doing more videos here. Um, and like some serious, some funny, some silly, whatever. If this video resonated with you at all, consider subscribing. Um, and just remember, you don't need a God to be good. Peace out.